Okay, so I decided I wanted to build a gas station chain. The idea looked almost embarrassingly simple. I would buy land beside a busy road, install fuel pumps, put up a bright sign drivers could see from the highway, and collect money every time someone stopped to fill the tank. Cars need fuel every day. Trucks need fuel. Delivery vans need fuel. Families need fuel before road trips. Workers need fuel before Monday morning. So in my head, a gas station looked like one of the safest businesses I could possibly own. Then I started looking at the numbers, and the first number nearly killed the dream. In the United States, building a modern gas station with a convenience store commonly costs about $3.8 million to more than $10 million before the first customer even arrives, depending on the land, market, size, and equipment. I would need land or a long-term lease, construction crews, underground tanks, pumps, electrical systems, cameras, permits, environmental inspections, insurance, signs, store equipment, and an initial supply of fuel. That meant I could spend years saving money, convince a bank to finance the rest, sign personal guarantees, and still open with no proof that drivers would choose my station. But the biggest surprise came after that. A gas station can sell millions of dollars worth of fuel and still make surprisingly little profit. The revenue looks enormous because gasoline is expensive and thousands of drivers can pass through a strong location every week. Money flows through the pumps all day, and from the outside it can look like the owner is printing cash. But most of that money would not belong to me. It would go back to the fuel supplier. It would go to transportation companies, taxes, employees, payment processors, insurance, electricity, maintenance, cleaning, security, and repairs. It would pay for broken nozzles, tank inspections, pump servicing, lighting, snow removal, and keeping the property safe enough that people would stop there at midnight. After all of that, I might keep only a few cents from each gallon sold. At a U.S. pump price near $4.10 per gallon, a driver filling a 20-gallon tank could spend about $82, and my profit from that entire fuel transaction might still be smaller than the profit on the coffee they bought inside. That completely changed the way I looked at the business. The fuel was not necessarily the product that made me rich. The fuel was the reason people entered the property. The real money could come from everything around it. Coffee, hot food, cold drinks, snacks, basic groceries, a car wash, an EV charger, a loyalty program that gave customers discounts but encouraged them to return 3 times a week instead of once. That was the contradiction at the center of the entire business. The giant fuel sign attracted the customer, but the small items near the cash register often created the profit. And that meant I was not simply planning to own fuel pumps. I was planning to run several businesses at the same time. I would be running a retail store where inventory could expire or disappear. I would be running a food business where speed, cleanliness, and consistency mattered. I would be running a car wash where one equipment failure could shut down a high-margin service for days. I would be managing hazardous fuel underground, expensive machines above ground, and customers who expected everything to work 24 hours a day. Then there was the location. A beautiful station on the wrong road could fail. A plain station beside a busy intersection could become a machine. Traffic mattered, but traffic alone was not enough. Drivers needed easy access, a safe entrance, enough turning space, clear signs, good lighting, and a reason to choose my station instead of the one 2 minutes away. If I chose badly, no amount of cheap coffee or clean bathrooms would save me. If I chose well, the location itself could become more valuable every year. That was when I understood the second uncomfortable truth. The first gas station would not really be a fuel business. It was a retail machine disguised as a line of fuel pumps by a busy main road. The next morning, I stopped thinking like a customer and started thinking like an owner. Customers see a canopy, a sign, store, and pumps. I saw problems buried under concrete. The land came first. I could buy a property and control it for decades, but that would consume a huge amount of capital before construction began. Or I could lease it and protect my cash, but then I would be building a multi-million-dollar business on land I did not control. A bad lease could trap me. If the landlord raised the rent, blocked an expansion, or ended the agreement after I had paid for tanks and pumps, I could lose the value of everything attached to that site. Before signing anything, I needed to know how many cars passed, how easily they could turn in, and whether the road might change. A busy road was not automatically a good location. A hidden entrance, a difficult turn, or the wrong side of the commute could send thousands of drivers past me. Then construction began. This was not a building where I could discover a mistake and fix it later with paint. The critical equipment was underground. Fuel tanks had to be installed correctly, protected from corrosion, connected to monitoring systems, and surrounded by equipment designed to detect leaks. A small leak could become a huge bill. Fuel could contaminate soil, spread beneath nearby properties, and create years of cleanup costs. Insurance would not erase every risk. Prevention and maintenance mattered more. I needed specialists before customers, engineers, environmental consultants, contractors, fuel suppliers, lawyers, insurance brokers, fire inspectors. Every person added fees, documents, and another reason the opening date could move. Permits were not just paperwork. They controlled the schedule. One late approval could stop construction. A rejected entrance plan could leave me with a finished building customers could not safely enter. And while delays increased the cost, the bank would still expect payments. The business could begin losing cash long before it opened. Interest, taxes, deposits, security, and supplier guarantees could drain cash before the first sale. Even the opening inventory was more complicated than it looked. I needed enough gasoline and diesel to serve customers, but every gallon underground represented cash I could not use elsewhere. If fuel prices dropped after I bought it, competitors could lower their signs while I was still selling yesterday's expensive inventory. If prices rose, customers might blame me even when my margin barely changed. The sign showed the price, but not who kept the money. That was when I built my first real budget. Not a hopeful budget where everything went right, a survival budget. I added land, construction, tanks, pumps, permits, legal fees, insurance, equipment, cameras, signs, inventory, payroll, utilities, and several months of reserves. Then I added money for problems I could not predict. The number was uncomfortable, but cutting the budget blindly would have been more dangerous. Cheaper tanks could create larger maintenance costs. A smaller store could limit high-margin products. Weak security could drive customers away after dark. The cheapest station to build was not always the cheapest station to own. That was my first major expectation reversal. I had entered the project believing the fuel pumps were the business and everything else was optional. Now I understood the pumps were only one part of a larger system. Land controlled the traffic. The underground equipment controlled the risk. The store controlled the margin. The financing controlled how long I could survive. And the permits controlled whether any of it could open. Before I sold my first gallon, I was already managing real estate, construction, regulation, inventory, debt, and environmental liability. The station did not begin when the first customer arrived. Financially, it began the moment I signed the first contract. Once the station opened, I finally saw why fuel revenue could fool an owner. The sales report looked impressive. Hundreds of drivers stopped every day. The pumps ran from morning until late at night. On busy weekends, revenue climbed so quickly that I could convince myself the hardest part was over. But revenue was only the first line. Every gallon I sold had already cost me money before it reached the customer's tank. I paid the supplier, transportation, taxes, and card processing fees. I paid employees to monitor the forecourt, clean spills, replace receipt paper, and help customers when a pump refused to read a card. Then came maintenance. Pumps needed calibration, hoses cracked, nozzles failed, screens froze, lights burned out, filters had to be changed. Underground systems needed inspections, and none of those bills cared whether fuel margins were strong. If I sold a huge volume at a tiny margin, I could create a mountain of revenue while keeping very little profit. Imagine I sold 300,000 gallons in 1 month. Recent U.S. industry figures show a retailer gross markup near 40 cents per gallon, but card fees, distribution, labor, utilities, maintenance, and other fuel selling expenses consume most of it. If I ultimately retained about 10 cents per gallon before rent, debt service, and income taxes, that enormous volume would produce only about $30,000. One equipment failure could erase a large part of it. A slow month could erase the rest. The number at the top of the report made me feel successful. The number at the bottom told me whether I actually was. That was when I stopped celebrating sales and started watching contribution margin. A driver who bought only fuel might help me a little. A driver who bought fuel, coffee, breakfast, and a car wash could be worth several times more. So I walked into the store and studied the shelves. Coffee cost little to make compared with its selling price. Fountain drinks worked the same way. Hot food had stronger margins than fuel. Bottled water, snacks, phone chargers, windshield fluid, and basic groceries solved urgent problems. Customers were not only paying for the item, they were paying for speed, convenience. But higher margins did not guarantee higher profit. Food could expire. Coffee could be thrown away. Employees could prepare sandwiches nobody bought. Inventory could disappear through theft, damage, or poor counting. A product with a high markup could still lose money if I managed it badly. The convenience store was more profitable than the pumps, but it was also more complicated. Fuel did not spoil overnight. Milk did. Gasoline did not need attractive packaging. Food did. The pumps did not care whether the counter looked clean. Customers did. I tracked how many fuel customers entered the store, how much they spent, what hours produced the largest baskets, and which products were thrown away. Then I changed the layout. Coffee moved closer to the entrance. Fast snacks moved beside the register. High-demand products became easier to see. Slow products lost shelf space. The goal was not to pressure people into buying useless things. It was to make the useful purchase obvious when they were already in a hurry. Gradually, the station's economics changed. Fuel still generated most of the revenue, but the store began generating more of the profit. That difference mattered because fuel prices moved constantly. When wholesale prices rose, customers became angry at the sign, even if my margin had not improved. The store gave me something fuel could not: control. I could improve the menu, reduce waste, negotiate supplier prices, train employees, and increase the average purchase. I could not control the oil market. The more I depended on fuel alone, the more my business depended on forces outside the station. The more I improved the store, the more the result depended on decisions I could make. By the end of the first year, I understood the real purpose of the pumps. They created traffic. My job was to turn that traffic into enough high-margin, repeat business to pay for everything the fuel margin could not. The next profit center I built was the car wash. At first, I treated it like an extra feature. Drivers could add a wash after filling the tank, and I assumed it would create a little more revenue. I was wrong. Compared with fuel, a well-run car wash could produce far more profit from one customer. I saw equipment, chemicals, electricity, maintenance, and another reason to choose my property over the station across the road. The difference was margin. Fuel required me to sell a large volume for a small return. A car wash could generate a much larger contribution from one purchase after the equipment had been paid for. But it was not automatic money. If the machine broke, revenue stopped. If the entrance was confusing, drivers skipped it. If the wash left dirt on the vehicle, one bad experience could destroy repeat business. Winter froze pipes. Hard water damaged equipment. Too many chemicals increased cost. Too few reduced quality. Behind the wall, it was another business. Then I added a cafe. Coffee had excellent margins, but only when people bought it. Hot food could increase the average purchase, but unsold food became waste. A breakfast sandwich that sold quickly made money. The same sandwich sitting too long became an expense. So I learned to manage time, not just inventory. Morning customers wanted speed. Late-night customers wanted hot food when most places were closed. The menu had to match the traffic pattern. Then came electric vehicle charging. Some people told me EV chargers would replace the fuel pumps. Others told me they would never make money. Both opinions were too simple. An EV charger changed how long customers stayed. A fuel customer might spend 5 minutes on the property. An EV driver could stay 20, 30, or 40 minutes. That time could be valuable, but only if I gave them a reason to spend it inside. A charger beside an empty parking space was an energy service. A charger beside clean bathrooms, coffee, seating, food, and reliable Wi-Fi was a customer acquisition system. Still, the economics were complicated. Chargers required expensive installation, electrical upgrades, software, maintenance, and sometimes demand charges from the utility. A busy charger could still produce weak profit if its costs were poorly managed. Once again, revenue was not the same as profit. An EV driver arriving with a low battery might depend on that charger working. Reliability was not just a technical issue, it was part of the brand. That pushed me toward the final piece, loyalty. At first, I thought a loyalty program was a discount. Offer fuel discounts, free coffee, and hope they returned. But the real value was information. The program showed me how often customers visited, what they bought, which offers changed their behavior, and whether they came only for fuel or used the store, cafe, wash, and chargers. That data helped me stop treating every customer the same. A commuter might respond to morning coffee rewards. A parent might value discounts on snacks and car washes. A delivery driver might care about fuel savings and fast service. The program allowed me to connect separate businesses into one system. Fuel created the visit. The store increased the basket. The cafe increased frequency. The car wash increased margin. The charger increased time on site. The loyalty program increased the chance that the same customer returned. That was the second major expectation reversal. I had assumed more services would simply create more revenue. In reality, their greatest value came from supporting one another. A station with 6 separate income streams was useful. A station where those streams pushed customers back into the same ecosystem was far more powerful. The chain did not become stronger because I sold more things. It became stronger because one customer could use several services, return more often, and become less sensitive to a small difference in fuel price. After the first station stabilized, I faced a dangerous temptation. I wanted to open the second one immediately. The first location was producing steady cash, and customers were returning. If one station worked, then 5 stations should work 5 times better. But scale did not multiply only the profit. It multiplied every mistake. A weak manager could damage service. Poor inventory control could turn small losses into a serious leak. One bad site could absorb the cash from 2 strong stations. So before I expanded, I asked a harder question. Was the first station successful because I had built a repeatable system, or because I was personally standing inside it every day fixing problems? That distinction mattered. If the business depended on me approving every order, solving every complaint, checking every shift, and watching every repair, then I did not own a chain. I owned a demanding job with fuel pumps. To grow, I needed procedures. Every station needed the same rules for inventory, fuel deliveries, cleaning, cash, equipment, food, and emergencies. I needed managers who understood the numbers, not just the daily tasks. A manager could keep shelves full and still lose money through waste. They could increase fuel volume by cutting prices too aggressively and destroy the margin. Good management meant balancing speed, service, cost, safety, and profit at the same time. Then came the second location. I almost chose a cheaper property because the price looked attractive. But cheap land can be expensive when nobody wants to stop there. The site had traffic, but most vehicles moved away from the entrance during the morning rush. Turning in required crossing several lanes, and drivers saw the station too late. On paper, the location looked busy. In reality, it was inconvenient. That was another expectation reversal. I thought lower land cost would protect my investment. Instead, paying more for a stronger location could reduce operating risk for decades. A good site worked every hour without wages. It advertised itself through visibility, captured traffic naturally, and made every other service more valuable. A bad site forced me to fight for every customer with discounts. So I rejected the cheap property and chose a more expensive corner near a growing residential area, a major intersection, and a route used by delivery drivers. The new site cost more, but it offered easier access, stronger visibility, and space for a larger store, a car wash, and future charging stations. A station designed only for today's traffic could become obsolete before the loan was repaid. I needed room for the business to change. As the second and third stations opened, scale finally began to help me. I could negotiate better prices because I bought more fuel, food, drinks, and supplies. I could share marketing costs across several locations. I could train managers using one system, move employees between stores, and use sales data to compare performance. One station showed me what happened. Several stations showed me what was normal. If coffee waste was twice as high at one location, I could investigate. If one manager sold more car washes from the same fuel traffic, I could study what they were doing and teach it to the others. Scale gave me bargaining power and better information, but it also created a new risk. The larger the chain became, the easier it was to hide bad decisions inside large revenue numbers. A weak station could appear healthy because the group was profitable. A growing chain could look successful while debt increased faster than cash flow. So I stopped asking only how many stations I owned. I started asking whether each station earned enough cash to support itself, maintain its equipment, repay its share of debt, and contribute to the chain. Growth was useful only when every new location made the system stronger. Otherwise, expansion was just a faster way to spread the same problem.